Originally, this video was going to be called something along the lines of, where are all the Overwatch theories? You see, despite this being a Blizzard game, a company that usually nurtures fairly large audiences focused solely on the lore of their titles, there doesn't seem to be very much discussion in this regard for Overwatch. I have searched around quite a bit for other channels talking about the lore, but the only ones producing content in the same line as I'm referring to focus usually on speculation with almost zero evidence to back it up. I personally prefer my theories to be more likely than not and rely on facts that we know for certain to create a discussion around a plot development that is probably going to happen at some point in the future of this game's universe. While it can be fun to dive deep down the rabbit hole with videos like Curse Entertainment's coverage on whether or not D.Va is a fake hero, these sort of discussions will more than likely prove meaningless when we finally do get more story to work off of. And what I just said right there, when we finally do get more story, that is why this video isn't going to be me ranting about the fact that I'm one of the only channels on YouTube making serious speculation about Overwatch's lore. Around the start of 2018, when I had first thought about making this video, I had a very different perspective considering we just had got a new cinematic and comic a few months prior. However, considering that it has now been almost 10 months since our last entry into this game's universe, I'm beginning to think that this is less a problem with the YouTube community and more with how Blizzard approaches releasing Overwatch's story. In case you don't keep up with Overwatch's lore as much as I do, the last cinematic we got was Reinhardt's Honor and Glory during 2017's BlizzCon in November, and while technically we received a comic for the Retribution Archives event just a few months ago, that was more complimentary to something that was going on in-game. It's still appreciated, but I don't think the game should be the only vehicle that furthers Overwatch's story. Prior to Retribution, the last actual comic we got was Searching, which was released almost 11 months ago now in September of 2017. It's funny to think that in a little over 2 years to develop the lore, and the universe's timeline has barely moved an inch. This is in stark contrast to any of Blizzard's other titles, where there are literal wiki pages upon wiki pages for every little detail that you could possibly imagine to exist. As someone who came to Overwatch from World of Warcraft, where I've read over 10 full-length novels taking place in that universe, it almost gives me shell-shock to be drip-fed such minor story development. As far as I know, the lore department working at Overwatch still exists, though you'd never be able to tell aside from Michael Chu's random vague forum posts about factoids on the playable characters. One of my biggest fears for this game would be that they still have all this lore stockpiled up, ready to dole out little by little, only to have the game's population decline some over time. Then Blizzard would just panic and release a literal tsunami of story all at once when they realize this may be their last chance to get their work out there. I don't want to believe they're being so selfish with their creation. However, when the most pertinent information we received outside of the game itself in the past year has been the fact that D.Va played more than just StarCraft professionally, and that Torbjorn can swap out his mechanical arm for different modes, it does make you wonder. And maybe this is just out of desperation, but my wondering has led me to the notion that Michael Chu and the rest of the franchise development department aren't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. It's been unusually quiet in the lore lately, even for Overwatch, which makes me wonder if Blizzard isn't working on something big. If we're not just waiting around awkwardly for nothing, but rather by the time this year's BlizzCon comes around, we won't be able to put our fears to rest that they weren't neglecting one of the most captivating aspects of this game. Imagine if they've been toiling away, working hard on a larger season of cinematics, or even a movie of some sort. I do think that a single movie wouldn't be able to properly develop a universe such as this, but imagine a smaller season of 10-ish cinematics released over the course of however many consecutive weeks. That would honestly be something that I'd be willing to wait an entire year for, especially if, for that short period of time, the timeline were expanded upon reasonably well. There's still characters from the original release of the game like Lucio, D.Va, and Zenyatta that haven't received a single story update ever. I'd love to see the giant Godzilla-like Omnic that D.Va is supposed to fight against. I want to see exactly how Lucio went from the son of a mistreated Fishcar employee to one of their biggest enemies, and I really want to know how Zenyatta decided fighting was better than praying for peace. And that's not even taking into account the events that have more or less been hyped up for a while now, like Orisa versus Doomfist, what Torbjorn is going to do with Bastion after they team up, and even what happens after Winston initiates the recall. There's so very much Blizzard could easily expand about Overwatch's story, and I'm not asking for entire novels like they have with their other IPs. I just want to see more than a few measly voice lines in-game and radio silence for an entire year leading up to the next BlizzCon. Maybe we'll get some sort of announcement in a couple of days when they travel to Gamescom, though I wouldn't be too surprised if they keep it to just announcements about the game development side of their job. I'm just hoping they figure out how to give us more lore at a reasonable output, because currently there's hardly anything to work with. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and if you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more like it, maybe even subscribe. Also, if you want to see the theories I was talking about, they'll be linked in the description below, as well as the cards in the top right corner of your screen. Links to my social medias and whatnot can also be found in the description. And as for the comment question, do you care about Overwatch's lore at all? I found that because it's a first-person shooter, most players seem to be disconnected from the story, but personally coming to this game less because of the genre it's in and more because of who made it, I'm used to much more speculation and discussion when it comes to Blizzard lore. Anyways, that's all the time I've got for today, so until next time, don't die.